Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at a tool called Utopia, which is a really old web framework that I made a very long time ago and I've maintained. It's over 10 years old actually. And one of the things that I want to do is look at how to turn web applications into gems. In Ruby, we have a tendency to build web applications in a way that's very heavy. We have an application directory like with Rails, which has all this stuff in it, and trying to turn that into a gem or into something which you can package up and reuse very easily is kind of an afterthought, at least in my experience. So I want to try and take one of the documentation tools that I've made and turn that into something which can just be packaged up as a single gem, and with minimal effort and minimal dependencies I can just build wikis. Now I know this has been done before a million times. This is not, I'm reinventing the wheel here of course, but I'm okay with that. So let me just show you what the current documentation looks like. So this is statically generated content, and it is generated from a wiki which is built inside this web framework called Utopia. And the reason why this is statically generated is so I can put it on GitHub pages very easily. And that actually simplifies the deployment. Awesome, we've got flickering again. Give me 2 seconds. NVIDIA, sort out your graphics card drivers. Let me just try toggling all of that stuff. Right, so let's have a quick look at this source code. I had to restart my computer just before for some reason. Fans were a bit noisy. And for some reason restarting it sometimes brings that back into alignment, so I'm not really prepared here at all, but that's okay. And actually what I didn't realize is how old the documentation wiki is. And so I wanted to demonstrate this working, but it's actually not working. So I guess we're going to have to fix this so we can update the documentation. So all of this is going to be changed, hopefully. So this is kind of the typical example of a Ruby web application. You know, you have some config, rack up. You might have a public directory with stuff in it. You might have some content, you know, in Rails this would be the app directory or whatever. You might have some code, application code, some tests. And this is not really something that is easy to package up and deploy like 50 times with different databases or different data sets or what have you. And so what I want to do is I want to turn this into a gem so that with minimal configuration, this can just all work out of the box. Like basically, ideally a directory full of markdown files, and then to spin up a wiki from that. So I started this a little bit early before I thought this would be an interesting live stream. So what I've got here is I've made a new gem called Utopia-Wiki. And what I've chucked in here is, this is actually a config.ru type setup. So basically it's a method that takes a builder and then it will put together all the middleware required to make that work. And in particular, it pulls out these directories from the gem. So site root is this directory, and pages and public are these 2 directories. And we'll come back to this because we're going to make some changes to here anyway. But this one here is essentially the view and controller layer of the web application. And this is just static content, some JavaScript and stuff. And so what I quite like about this is all packaged inside a gem. And what I've got is I've got a test website here. Even though it's inside this directory, it actually pulls in this stuff as a gem. So what I've got is a gem file, and it just pulls in that gem Utopia wiki, and it pulls in Falcon the server. And I think even this part could probably be simplified, but there is some stuff the user has to throw together. And finally, this config.ru, which also I think would be nice if we could simplify it, if it was somehow possible just to detect that this was a website based on a gem, and not have to specify this. But for now, like, I'm okay with these. Basically, the user has to specify those two files in order to have this full web application, which is defined by this gem. And I think that's kind of exciting to me because, the idea of building Utopia-blog or Utopia-wiki or Utopia-photo gallery or whatever, and just basically having a directory with a bunch of photographs in it and spinning that up is kind of exciting, that you don't have to build a whole, all the structure. And I guess the other thing is it's easier to update a gem than it is to update a whole web application. So if you've ever tried to build a web application out of Rails that you then kind of try to distribute as an application as a kind of a contained unit, if users are installing all those files into a directory and publishing them as opposed to pulling that stuff from a gem, then versioning gets really tricky because essentially their whole site is the library code, and all those assets need to be versioned. So I guess, like, I like the idea of like using a gem to keep all of that isolated. So let's go ahead and have a look at how this works. Just throw that down there, throw that over there. So we'll spin up a server. And Chrome loves to create SSL errors. Anyway, so this is now running live, and it's taking content from this directory. So if we come in here and we modified that, save it, and reload, it disappears. And I like this kind of structure because to me this can be version controlled in Git really easily. So even though you've got the capacity to have a live wiki, which you can edit straight here, you can also come over to a text edit, edit it, chuck it into Git, push it somewhere else. So there's a couple of issues, and I don't actually know exactly what's going on in the first issue. So let's have a quick look. So when you make a new link to a page that doesn't exist, what happens is this URL here is resolved to this controller file. And so this Utopia has a controller layer. There are some similarities to other web application frameworks, but Utopia is kind of unique in several ways. And so it has these patterns that you can match in the controller file. And so we what have we hit? We have hit this page is empty. Read contents. Yeah, so we've hit this controller action down here. So it's pattern matched that, which is matched Area 54 index, and it said content equals read contents. Read contents has tried to figure out if that content exists or not. Otherwise, it just returns this page is empty. And finally, this controller actually rewrites the action to be show. And so what happens is it hits this view, and this view just renders that markdown content. So it uses cram down document new self content, input GitHub formatted markdown, and then it turns into HTML. And so then we have this edit button here. When we hit edit, the URL has edit at the end, and so that hits that pattern there. And that provides this really basic editing interface. It's nothing fancy. It could be a lot better, but it worked for me for quite a while, so it is what it is. So if I do that, hit submit, and this is the error that I want to try and sort out, but it does actually exist here, and you'll notice it's also created the file over here, which is exactly what you want. So like this gem, all the logic of the web application is running inside from the gem, but all the content is coming from the directory that you run it in. And so for me, that's kind of the best of both worlds, because if I make a new version of this Utopia Wiki Gem, and I have 50 of these kind of repositories of content, and even maybe some of these repositories of content are nested. So I might have one of these for each gem that I manage, and that could have content. And then if I want to build a combined aggregation of all of that, then I can just use a git submodules or something and have a whole bunch of subdirectories. They all follow the same structure. So it should be fairly trivial and fairly straightforward to make that work. So it's kind of a nice structure from that point of view. So let's go ahead and figure out why there was an error. So part of the problem is that after you edit a page and it redirects, it basically doesn't redirect to the right thing. So that redirection happens on this line here. I was looking at this before, and this path doesn't include a trailing slash, and it probably should. Now, I don't actually know if the problem is on this line. So this is pattern matching. This control action, it runs on any path that starts off inside this wiki folder. And so every single URL that you type in here is running this code, which is extracting the full path and the path for the page on the file system, and then the actual markdown file with the content itself, and then it generates a title for that page. So every single wiki page is essentially hitting this controller method. And I don't quite know. I think the way this is probably being generated might be wrong, in which case the redirect here is wrong. But I can't change, I don't want to change this too much, because if I'm not careful, then it will pull the wrong file out of the file system. And I guess this is one of the things, I've never written specs for this wiki web application. There's a spec directory here, which has like nothing in it. And what's interesting is that if you build these web applications in Gem, as a gem, I feel like you'd build like a more robust set of specs around that behavior, because you've sort of got a small surface area in which to check. Whereas when you just have this random web application, some people are like, oh, it works, it's good enough. But if you're building it as a gem, you kind of probably follow better practices than that. So I'm kind of, that also makes me a little bit more excited about this approach. So let's have a look what's going on in here. Right, so I'm gonna, the only one thing I haven't figured out here is I don't have hot reloading, which is a little bit annoying. And so because the Falcon server is essentially loading a gem, and all the content for that is inside the gem, so it's sort of a weird development environment at the moment, and I've never actually done this before. So I think ideally you'd have a guard instance looking at the contents of the gem somehow and reloading. But I guess once this problem is fixed, I guess ideally you'd write specs or something, and then you wouldn't need to just do it like this, which is kind of a little bit of a strange way to do it, I guess. But so let's go ahead and just make a new page. Just going to jump all the way to the back to the top. There should be a link. I don't know why it's not. Wiki. There's probably an issue with splitting it into a gem and the content somewhere else. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that. Going to come here. It doesn't exist. I'm going to edit, and then I'm going to save it, and we should break here. So page path is this thing. I actually don't think it looks like an array, but I don't think it is an array. It is an array. Is it really an array? Okay. I thought it was actually a rich path data type, but it's not. I think that will be the right approach. So Utopia has a path object class, and that can coerce from an array using the square brackets. And Utopia path is a URI compliant path, not a file system compliant path. And the difference is how directories are handled. In the file system, you don't need a trailing slash, but in a URL, you do. So let's try that. I like that binding.rob destroys SIGINT. I don't know what they've done, but they trap signals, and they never even though you exit the binding context, they don't fix the signals back up. They don't restore them back to what they were. So Falcon, you can't quit Falcon after you use binding.rob. It's just like some issue with binding.rob that they have yet to sort out. Right, so let's delete area 54. That page doesn't exist. Edit page, save. Okay, that bug is now officially fixed. So one of the things that I thought would be fun to add to the wiki is a photo gallery. And it also demonstrates a little bit about how Utopia works. So the one thing about taking this approach as a gem is the gem is very opinionated. The structure of the gem cannot be modified easily from the consumer's point of view. Like I've put one argument in here, which is locales, which means you can localize the content, although that's actually not supported through the wiki system. But Utopia supports first-class localization through all of its content. And so the tricky part is that this is static, and the user can't add extra stuff in here or change this behavior unless you provide some kind of method. And then that would come in through the user-specified config.ru, and you could probably put some some other arguments in here to control that behavior. And there's been discussion, there's actually a rack issue to make something like use Utopia wiki actually behave something like that. And so there is some interesting, if this thing responds to call or rack up build or something, rack up call, no one can figure out what it should be called because they want to break existing stuff and what have you. Then you can do this, and then the instance of builder or some wrapper is passed in, which you can allow this thing to add instances to the builder, to add middleware. But for now, I'm perfectly happy with that, and it works with all current versions of Rack, so it's okay. So yeah, the user's control over how this behaves is very limited, and also what is limited is if we decide to expose or structure the content in a certain way. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I want to add dependency Utopia Gallery. And what Utopia Gallery is a plugin to Utopia for doing image galleries, really simple, straightforward image galleries. And it does require a few extra bits, which off the top of my head, I can't remember what they are. I might have documented it, so we could try looking at the documentation for that, I guess. And because we make this choice, any wiki that uses this gem will follow through or have to take it, deal with that choice. Okay, right. So here are the instructions. Put that into there. We need to add the gallery as a namespace to here. And so this is actually a kind of a XML namespace, and you'll see how this is used in a moment. This provides a set of tags for generating galleries. Then I wrote some JavaScript to do this too. Is there any instructions on how to use that JavaScript? I don't know. Okay, so let's add a directory with some photographs. Now, as you know, Markdown just supports straight through with HTML, and so I think we can just chuck in the XML that is required here, but we haven't actually. There's one other bit that's required, so I don't think we'll get actual photographs. Give me 2 seconds. I will find some random picture of some sort. Okay, I have some thumbnails. And they are PNGs, not JPEGs. I don't know if that's going to be a problem. I guess we'll find out soon enough. Right, so gem file. We added that. We updated that. We added that there. I think. Test pages, wiki photos. I think this is another example of a problem that I am going to encounter with the gemification process, but that's okay. Okay, so this has got these tags, and I think the problem is this bit. So the media root is where the stuff is stored, and we also need to set up an accessible public directory and a cache directory. Now that there defaults to the current working directory plus that bit, and so it's basically looking in the wrong place. Let's just see if we can fix that. Okay, we're almost there. Test wiki photos. Why is that? Okay, so it's looking in a directory called wiki. I know, it's because we are using these virtual paths in Utopia and the path of the files is not relative to that. Okay. So what we actually have to do is that part should be okay. Okay, great. So this is probably another issue I have to consider because we're using this virtual path that is being internally remapped. When we specified the path, that path wasn't relative to the file, it was relative to the URL. And so we probably just have to like figure out a way of making that work properly. There should be an easy way of doing that. And the other part is that nothing actually showed up. And that's because we don't actually have a tag suitable for rendering that content. So let's have a look at what's actually going on. Wiki photos Falcon thumbnail. Is that because I'm not exporting a public directory? Probably. Let's see if that quick hack solves the problem. Okay, there we go. So this means that we're serving static files, not just from the gem, not just from the gem's public root, but also from the user's public root. And this might be something which this is a little bit of a hack. So, but I guess it makes sense as well if we are expecting the gem to have its own static content as well as the user providing static content, then there's no chance but we have to layer this stuff on top of each other, which I think is okay. Like, I think that's probably by design, that you have a gem which provides a public directory, and then the user is running a web application which also might have the expectation of a public directory, and probably it should override what's happening. So let's come over here. We get really huge images, which is not really helpful. So one of the features of this Utopia gallery thing is that you can make the convenient resizing of your photos. So let's go ahead, and I think this is also going to cause problems because the cache directory is not in the public root. So, but at least we can try it out. So we're going to modify the gems side, not the user's content. We're going to add a new thing in here called maybe thumbnail is better. And so Utopia has these files called xnodes, and they are literally XML, kind of a pseudo XML format. Utopia is super strict. It's essentially HTML5 but with validations. So it won't let you do things like have the implicit self-closing tags. You have to close everything. And generally this means that your web pages don't have bugs in terms of their actual markup, because it will complain about it. So we've added this underscore thumbnail to xnode, and we're going to tell it the gallery to use that tag when it renders. And so let's see if that part works. I didn't save that file. It was empty. Okay, that makes more sense. Now this is the next problem. This cache is no longer, it's not in the public. So where did the cache actually end up going? Okay, so we now have these like cached resized images. And we now need to make sure that's being served as well. So this might be a case of rethinking the way paths are handled in this particular framework so that this process is a bit more straightforward, it's a bit more consistent. But again, what we can do is we can just make a quick hack, which is like getting more and more hilarious. I'm okay with this. I think like get it working and then make it beautiful. So that's gonna be my philosophy from now on. Right, so public and that now works. So if we come back here, so now we can have these beautiful square thumbnails, which aren't really that great, but oh well. Now, what's really cool about this is that all of that logic is contained inside this gem, and if I was to release a new version of this gem, well, there's no versions released now, essentially any wiki which wanted this functionality would just use it by updating the gem. There's no extra files that need to be created. That thumbnail file that we made doesn't need to be distributed or installed or whatever. And so for me, that's kind of an exciting thing and really what I wanted to talk about. And this is really early days. This is just like a complete prototype. I don't really know how this is going to fit together ultimately, but I think that I'm excited and I want to publish this so that it's useful for my own projects, and I hope that you can also play around with it and find it useful. And I'm going to remove the branding so it's just really simple and straightforward. I'm not really interested in adding support for themes or anything else at this point. I might have a dark mode and light mode. Actually, I'll show you one more thing that is cool. Have I got listings in there? I think I should have listings. Actually, I can just point it straight at the code. Okay. What is it? What is this index? That's funny. This is a way of including source code from the gem itself, which actually isn't that useful right now, but it was a source attribute. Okay. Source equals, and again, I actually don't know if this is, I don't know what this is relative to. Pages, wiki, content. I think I do need to actually change the behavior of what that is relative to, because it's kind of annoying. No such file or directory. It's under this whole thing. Relative to the path of the page. The hell is that? This is going to be fun to solve this problem. I mean, not this particular instance of the problem, but just generally how to separate gem specific paths and user content specific paths. It's so much easier when you just dump all the application code in one folder and go, yeah, that's how it works, and then everything is just relative to that. But I think the benefits of putting all the wiki, application into a gem and just having the user content separated, I think it's a great idea. Why is this? I was trying to make a quick hack so that this works. Okay, I see what's happening. It's actually not. Maybe that will solve the problem. No such file or directory. That should be. The whole thing is okay. That is not what I wanted. Relative to the page path, I think. Okay. Okay, there we go. That was a terrible example. Um, and I'll have to tidy this up because this is just completely ridiculous. But I can't be bothered doing it right now. So that is the content. And I don't think I actually support highlighting Markdown using this tool. But we can try it. No. But that can be index highlighted. And so I think what's pretty cool about this is that out of the box, all the basic stuff can be covered, and I can customize it specifically for documentation that I want to do. And yeah, so anyway, look, I'm just going to finish it there. I'm really happy with this crazy proof of concept, and I want to release this as the gem. You can basically pull this gem down, and you can start it up in a directory. I think I'll try and simplify the gem file in the config.ru situation, either creating it automatically. I mean, ideally, you don't have to create it at all. Ideally, you can just go utopia-wiki, enter, and it will just spin up an instance of Falcon and run a wiki in that directory without any of this stuff. But versioning is good, and this is how you version with Ruby, so I'm okay with that to start with. And then, ideally, once this is sorted out, it should be really easy to scale this up to multiple gems and to do other things like, for example, Utopia Wiki can easily generate the static copy of the site. And so ideally that's just built straight into the gem, and it's just a matter of going Utopia Wiki, make me a static version of the site. And that should be really easy. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again in the future. And feel free to try this tool out. I'll probably publish at least a version 0.1.0 later today. And once I've got the path issues sorted out. Excellent. Thank you.